Okay, we've now got our Signal R service working, but what we're doing isn't really optimal. If we go back and take a look at our presence hub, for example, then what we're doing inside here is we're returning the list of online users to everybody every single time. Clearly, that's not really optimal. We only want to send this particular list if the user is connecting. Whereas if they're already connected, then really we just want to update the list with who has connected. So for this one, where we're sending back the get online users, then really what we want to do is just send this back to the caller. And we don't really want to send the same thing for when a user disconnects, so we'll also remove this as well. In fact, we can remove both of these lines. Because what we're going to do is just return the updated user when a user is online, and we'll also know who's removed themselves from the connection as well. So we don't need the second method there. So what we'll do, we'll go back to our presence tracker. And what we'll take a look at inside here is we'll return booleans from this. So we'll return a task of bool. And what we'll do inside here, we'll add a boolean and just say is online. And we'll set this to false initially. And what we'll do, if we've already got a dictionary entry for the username, we won't do anything. We'll just keep this online as false. But if they've genuinely just connected and it's a new connection, then what we'll do is we'll set this online equal to true. And then all we'll do is we'll just return task from results and we'll say is online. And then we'll just do a similar thing for a user disconnected as well. We'll return a task of boolean. And what we'll do, we'll just add a boolean. And we'll call this one is offline. And again, we'll just set this one equal to false initially. And if the user doesn't have a key in the dictionary, then we're just going to say return task, and then we'll say from results. And we're going to say is offline. And what we also want to do is say that the user is only offline if they don't have any connections for that particular username. So if we're removing the dictionary entry for that user, then we're going to set the is offline, and we're going to set this equal to true. And then we can say return task from results, and we'll say is offline. So what we'll do, we'll head back to our presence hub, and what we're going to do, this one's fine because we're going to send this to the caller who has just connected. They're definitely going to need the list of online users. So what we'll do with this one is we'll only return this if the user is online. So what we can do is say var is online equals, and then we get the result back from our user connected. And then what we can do is just add an if statement and say if is online, then we are going to send the user is online to all the connected clients apart from the caller. So we're going to send this one to the others. And we'll do a very similar thing for the on disconnected. We'll say var is offline equals, because we're getting that back from our presence tracker. And what we'll do, we'll just do the same check and we'll say if is offline, then we'll notify the other users that someone has genuinely gone offline. But if they're still maintaining one connection on a different device, then they're still going to be showing as online, which is fine. And what we can do then is we can go back to our presence service, and what we'll do is we'll take care of two things at once. We'll remove the annoyance from our app by removing this toast, and we'll replace it with just an ability to update the online users that we're tracking inside here. So what we'll do, we'll say list.online users, and once again, we don't want to mutate data here, just in case that interferes with how Angular tracks changes in our observables. So what we'll do, we'll say this online users, and then we'll pipe, and then we'll say take, and we'll say 1, and then we'll subscribe. And this is a list of usernames. And inside here, we'll say list.online users source dot next. And what we'll do inside here is we'll open square brackets, and once again, we'll just use the spread operator. and we'll pass in our usernames, and we'll add the additional username. For the next one down, what we'll do, we'll say list.onlineusers.subscribe.pipe, and we'll say take one, and we'll subscribe, and we'll say username, and this is going to be the username that's going offline. And what we'll do, we'll say list.onlineUserSource, and we'll say next. And once again, we'll use the square brackets and the spread operator, and we'll say usernames, and this should be usernames there, and we'll say usernames, and we'll say filter, and we'll say x goes to x that's not equal to username. And this would remove them from a list of online users. So let's make sure we haven't actually broken anything by doing this. And we'll just go back, and we can see Bob is online, and if I just go over to where Bob is and I just go forwards to Google, then we can see Bob is now offline. And if I go back, then we should see that Bob is now back online. And we've removed the annoying toasts as well to notify us whenever a user comes online. So that one's pretty straightforward. We've now optimized that, and we're only returning the single user to anyone who's already connected. What we'll take a look at next is slightly more complex, but we're going to do the same kind of thing with our messages. And instead of returning the message thread to both users, we're only going to send that to the connecting client and update the message read property in the client that's already connected if they are in the same group. So we'll take a look at that one next. Okay, now what we're going to do is just take a look at our message hub and see what we can do to improve this. And what we're doing at the moment, if we take a look at the hub, is that when a client connects, then we're sending our message thread to both of the connected users, even though one will already have it. So what we're going to do is take a look at what we can do to correct this. So inside our two methods down here to add to a group and remove from group, first of all, we don't need this inside here. I think my initial plan was to put these in separate files and we needed the context, but because we're inside the hub, we don't actually need the hub caller context in here. And we also don't need the connection ID here either, because once again, we're still inside the hub, so we can swap this for context and the connection ID. Now what we're going to do from these two methods is we're going to return the group, the message group that a user belongs to, and we're going to send the group back to the members of the group. So they're always going to know who is connected inside the group that they're in, and therefore we'll be able to check to see if the recipient has joined a group and mark the messages as read. So this one's pretty easy. We've already got the group that we're getting from our repository anyway. And then all we need to do is say, instead of returning at this point, we'll say if, and we'll check to make sure that we have saved successfully, and then we're just going to return the group. And what we'll also need to do, because we are returning from this now, is we need to throw an exception if that doesn't work. So we'll just throw a new hub exception, and we'll just say failed to join group. The next one, the remove from message group, does give us a little bit more to think about, because we do need to get the group for this particular connection. Because we're again going to want to return the group from this particular method. So we'll add the group inside here. But what we need is a method so that we can get the group for this specific connection. Instead of just the connection, we need the group. And then we can get the connection from inside the group. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to go to our iMessage repository, the interface first of all. And we're going to need to add a new method. And we're going to say task that's going to return a group. And we're going to say get group for connection. And we'll pass the string of the connection ID to this one. And then we can open up our message repository for the implementation class. And inside here, we're just going to implement this particular interface. And we'll scroll down and find the method. So we need to return a group from this. So what we'll do, we'll say return, and we'll say await, and we'll go to our context and to our groups. and we need to include the connections. So we'll say C goes to C dot connections because this is our related entity. And then we want to add a where statement and say C goes to C dot connections dot any, and we're going to look for X dot connection ID that's equal to the connection ID that we're passing in as a parameter. And then we're just going to say first or default async, which is going to return us a group, but we also need the async on here to remove the errors. So this is going to return a group. So now we have this, we can head back over to our message hub, and what we'll do, instead of getting the connection, we'll say get group for connection, but we still need access to the connection so that we can actually remove the connection. So what we can do is say, and we'll call this group, not connection, and we'll say var connection equals, and we've got our group that includes our connection, so we can get it from inside there. And we'll just say first or default, and we'll say X goes to X dot connection ID that's equal to the context dot connection ID. And then we can use the message repository remove connection method, and then we save all async. But once again, what we'll do, we'll check to see if this is successful, and we'll return the group. And if that fails, we'll throw a new hub exception, and we'll just say failed to remove from group. Okay, so now we're good. Now we've got two methods that return the currently populated group that we can use to return to the group themselves. And what we'll do, we'll scroll up to our onConnected and onDisconnected methods. And what we'll do is we'll say var group equals and add to group, and we're not passing the context. And then what we can do is, instead of sending the receive message thread to the group, what we're going to do is send this to the caller. So we'll remove that and swap that for caller. So whoever's connecting needs the receive message thread. They need that particular method. And what we'll do, because the group is being updated at this point, what we'll do is say await clients and group, and we'll pass in the group name, and then we'll say send async, and we'll create a new method and just say updated group. And what we'll do is we'll pass the group back in this particular method. And then what we'll do is we'll say var group, because we get this back when a client disconnects now, and we don't need to pass in the connection ID here. And then we can say await and clients dot group, and we'll say group dot name, and we'll say send async, and we're going to say updated group, same method name that we were using above, and we'll pass in the group. So both of these methods are now going to return an updated group to anyone else that's still connected in that group. Obviously, if the group is empty, SignalR doesn't send anything because there's nothing to listen to what it's sending. So we don't need to worry about that. SignalR is going to, if the group is empty, it simply doesn't send anything to anyone because the group is empty. But that's fine. And what we can do now is head back to our clients. And what we'll do is, let's clean these up at the top. And what we'll do is, in our client folder, inside the source, inside the app, and inside the models folder, we'll just create a new file, and we'll just call it group.ts. We'll create an interface for this. And we'll just say export interface and group, and it's going to have a name, which is a string, and it's going to have connection or connections, and that's going to be for a type of connection. So we'll say interface connection, and this is going to have a connection ID, which is a string, and the username, which is also a string. And we'll say our connections is a connection array. And we'll make use of this in our message service. So let's go to our message service. Now, any new message that a user receives is automatically going to be marked as sent, which is fine. We're going to get the message thread when we join a message group, also fine. But what we want to make sure of is that if we join another message group, then that user automatically marks the messages as read, because when we join it, that means we're reading the messages at the same time. But now we've got a new method to listen for. So what we'll do, we'll say this.hub connection and on, and we'll say updated group, and I'm going to double check that to make sure that we've got the correct name there. So I'm just going to go to the message hub and update group. I thought I might have spelt this incorrectly somewhere. So updated group and updated group. We need to make sure these are the same. And we also need to make sure we use the same method inside our message service. Otherwise, things are not going to work. And what we're going to get from this is a group, which is going to be a type of group. And then what we can do inside this particular method, what we want to do is take a look inside our message thread and see if there's any unread messages for the user that's just joined this group. And if there are, then we're going to mark them as read inside here. So what we'll do, we'll say if group.connections, and we're going to say sum, and we'll say x goes to x.username is equal to the other username that we pass in to this particular method. And then we'll say this.message thread, and we'll pipe, and we'll take one. Same technique we're using as before, we just don't want to mutate this particular array of messages. And then we'll subscribe, and we'll get the messages back from this. And then what we'll do, we'll say messages, and we'll say for each, and we'll say message. And inside here, we'll say if the, or exclamation mark and message dot date read. So if it's not been read, then we're going to say message dot date read is equal to a new date, and we'll just say date dot now. And then after this loop, what we'll do, we'll say list.message thread source dot next, and once again we'll just use the spread operator and pass in the updated messages now. But this creates a new array, so it shouldn't interfere with Angular change tracking. So we should be good to test this now, so let's go take a look. Now I'm logged in as Lisa on this one, and Bob's online, so let's go and take a look at Bob's messages. And if I take a look at what Bob's looking at, well, he's not looking at anything. He's just on the home page at the moment. And I'm just going to say, hi Bob, press return, and the message is unread. Now, Bob has received a notification that I've just missed, so let's go to our matches and then go to Lisa. Now, I've clicked on the message thread, so what I want to see is this updated in this client as well. Perfect. That's what we were looking for, and obviously we don't need to worry about doing anything special when we send a message, because when they're online, then it automatically gets marked as read. Perfect. So we're done. We've got Signal R installed, active, optimized, and we're good to go. Give your console a quick check, make sure there's nothing in there that you don't want to see in there. We're going to have busier logs now anyway because of the connection information that we get from Signal R. So that's all fine. And once you're happy, then what we can do is head back and we can save our changes into source control. And what we'll do is we'll give this a commit message and say end of section 17. And I'm going to stage the changes, and then I'm going to commit, and we're going to push these on up to GitHub. And we'll wrap this up with a summary.